3, 2, 1. Welcome to the show, In Your Face, Season 2, Episode 8. This is going to be one of the worst shows we've ever had. It's an all-Baltimore show. And on this show is the worst person on Twitter. Mr. Ty Xanders himself has joined us. I'm kidding. He's a good friend of both Andy and I, and one of the most knowledgeable guys in the world of lacrosse on recruits. He would be considered the Todd McShay. I'm going here instead of say what's the other Baltimore Calvert Hall guy's name? I forget him. Mel Kiper, right? I would put him more. I would put Ty on the Todd McShay line because I like Todd. I used to actually kind of almost share an office with Todd up in New England. Not sure where he is now, but it was weird because all the 3D lacrosse guys were like, "Yeah, Todd McShay's office is like right around the corner."
Right.
So
Ty Xanders. He's Ty Xanders.
Ty Xanders. So Ty, the last couple of days, Ty Xanders, by the way, is the founder of RecruitingRundown.com. So check it out when you get the chance. But Ty just recently came out with the top 100 2016 recruits, which you should all know right now are current freshmen in college. Ty, talk to us a little bit about how you've generated this list, the information you've gathered, and certainly, as we've noticed, a lot of your guys are starting to show up even early in the Division I season 2017.
Yeah, so I did it a little bit differently this year, just with some stuff going on. I kind of emphasized the underclassmen first, and then, kind of wanted to come out with this list in January or February. And, of course, it had to be the night before Division I lacrosse kicked off on ESPNU. But, it was really made a little bit easier now that you had the U19 games. They kind of gave you a really good measuring stick for how these kids would fare at the collegiate level. So I go back and I look at as much tape as I possibly can, whether it's from the Baltimore area or Long Island, New Jersey, whatever I get my hands on, and then talk to some college coaches, a ton of them mostly in August and September, and kind of keep up with them a little bit, throughout the fall. I didn't really get to cheat, I guess to be called, and catch any scrimmages or any of that, or any film in that sense, but just kind of go back. And people kind of don't realize that it's not really the stats or accomplishments that really matter when it comes to these kids. I think it's just you want to project how they'll fare, all 4 years. It's not instant impact. It's not, who was first team all this in high school. I think, as you guys both know, coaching so much college lacrosse in the past, is that it's all a matter of the right fit. I think, a kid may have a better career if he's a highly ranked recruit coming out of, say, Colgate or Bucknell or Loyola, or even Ivy League, or Towson, wherever, rather than, say, Hopkins or Carolina or Notre Dame, where you're getting tons and tons of so-called blue chip recruits. So it's just a matter of kind of finding the right formula and considering all the variables, because it's definitely a thankless task and a tough task because there's just so much talent, so much more talent now than there was, 5-10 years ago. So it's gotten difficult each year, more difficult each year. And there are about pretty much 5 guys this year that I've considered for that number one spot. So it was tough, but I feel pretty strongly about how strong this class is, and it's pretty deep, especially on offense.
So Ty, just a quick question regarding this list. I when you put this together, this is based on you ranking them in anticipation of the impact that they will make on game day for these respective teams that they play for, right? Is that kind of,
correct,
in a nutshell, the way that you put them together?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. Obviously, you can't predict injuries, and hopefully none of these kids have injuries. But, okay, so it's not necessarily their body of work as high school players as much as it is looking at their athleticism, their skill set, their game IQ, their respective intangibles of competitive spirit and hardworking, being mentally tough, coachable, all that stuff, all factors into how you rank these guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the tough part is kind of predicting some of those intangibles and kind of what I call variables. I feel that maybe I've done a pretty good job over the past couple of years kind of predicting. And anybody who knows the game and even evaluate athletic talent can kind of predict who will be the best players at the next level if you watch enough high school lacrosse in the recruiting circuit. And that's one of the things I kind of mentioned is that I know this class so well is because I've been able to watch them. And,
Right.
the tough part is kind of figuring out, which you can't really predict is, who will maybe rest on their laurels, who will maybe get bogged down in the depth chart, who won't vibe well with the coaching staff, blah, blah, blah. There's so many variables that kind of go into measuring a player's success in college because it's just a matter of the right fit. And that's why, I was looking back to the class of 2012, which was one of the first classes I ranked when I was inside lacrosse. And out of that top 100, I think it was between 15 and 20 that either transferred or quit lacrosse entirely, So
wow.
It's a really high number. And it's not shocking. I think it'll probably even get higher as the years go on, just with how early these kids commit. Because many of these players were committing as freshmen, sophomores, the ones that are in this list. So you really don't know what the best fit will be. And many will wind up in other college rosters, or maybe have injuries or hopefully not, off the field issues. But so much goes into it, and you really don't know. I mean, there have been plenty of top 10 players that haven't panned out for whatever reason. I'm hoping we don't have a ton of those, so there's no egg in my face. But it's definitely something that I enjoy, and it was kind of just fun to be able to attend the Hopkins Navy game, which we'll get into eventually. Attend that and kind of say, he's looking pretty good, that number 11 recruit, and all that. So it's fun to watch the college season and kind of seeing the results and going forward in that sense and kind of measuring how these players will do.
How did you,
Ty?
go ahead.
Go ahead, AJ.
Quick question, and I'll let you go. How do you prioritize ranking, say, a feed first ex-attackman versus a catch and finish scoring attackman? How do you prioritize one versus the other? I mean, for me, I always hold somebody that, can initiate the play. I would rank somebody like Rob Pennell as, sort of a dodge and feed or dodge and score attackman ahead of somebody that is a catch and finish attackman, just because I think that's a harder skill set to find. Did you have criteria that you would use when trying to decide the difference between, say, a Jared Bernhardt that you have at 1 as clearly he's clearly a playmaker type guy, and I'll just go with, say, Mac O'Keefe, who may be more of a catch and score type guy without knowing his game too well, but certainly looking at his 7 goals first game against RMU, to me, what Jared Bernhardt does is harder to find in the recruiting process and a harder transition from high school to college than it is to be somebody that goes from catch and finishing in high school to catch and finishing in college. How did you compare those two as you were figuring out who to rank 1 and who to rank behind that guy?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think, I as you said, and I agree 100%, it's definitely harder to find the player that creates offense, off the feed or off the dodge than just a kid who will, catch and score, like a say Mac O'Keefe. There are plenty of players like that, but it feels to me like there's so many street attackmen or finishing attackmen out there, and I want someone that can really create their own offense. You look at Jeff Keat. I think that people will be blown away watching Cornell over the next 4 years, because a player like that, think about it. I mean, Canadians are kind of pegged as that finishing type, and he is just the opposite, in that he can kind of do both. And those are players you kind of want to prioritize a little bit, because in a sense they mean more to their team, their team's success. I think, as you both know, a player, there's so much value placed in a player that makes the guys around him better. And those feeding attackmen, those do-it-all attackmen, dodging attackmen, tend to make the guys around them better and help their team more than, say, a finishing attackman who, they pump in a lot of goals and they're huge. Their shot percentage is high. They're great off ball. They could be pretty pivotal on extra man, but there's certainly more value, placed on the Michael Krauses and Michael Sowers and Jeff Keats of the world at attack. But plenty of players that I think, if I had to guess, if we're looking ahead and maybe thinking about, Inside Lacrosse's top 25 freshman polls that they put together, throughout the year, that's a lot of finishing attackmen on there. Guys that kind of get in there because they can finish well. A lot of Canadians, you think of the kid at Rutgers last year, Adam Harlan-Bees. He was a finishing attackman and was one of the best freshmen in the country. But there are definitely a lot of kids like that, that can just bury the rock. But to kind of reiterate for the millionth time, definitely more value placed on the kid that can make the kids around him better.
So, Ty, we've only seen about, I'd say 10 or 11 teams play so far. And some of the guys that we've seen a lot of, even just in the first games of the season, we've seen guys like, let's go through Jack Rapine, Riley Walsh, Gerard Arsteri, Mac O'Keefe. We've seen others on your list. Are you already regretting whether putting them too high or too low on your list based on their performances either in the first week of the season? Mac O'Keefe goes out there and scores 7 goals in his first opener. Obviously, I don't think he's going to average 7 goals for the rest of his career. But then you've got guys that aren't quite making an impact yet. And you're going to have that in your top 50. That's, of course, going to happen. It always depends on the position he plays and the depth in front of him, of course. But even in the first week, do you get this sense of like, oh, crap, I should have dropped him or I should have made him higher? And do you already have an example of that so far?
I have much bigger regrets in my life than, stuff like that. But, I think just the interesting part about, and I've never done this before, posting a list. I wanted to get it out a week ago, but went on vacation, but posting a list so close or pretty much right on top of the start of college lacrosse, I knew that this list would be fresher in people's brains. It's certainly fresher in my cluttered head. But there's really no regrets. I think it's such a wait and see approach. And it's just so difficult, no matter how touted you are, how what league you played in, and how battle tested you were in high school. It's just, you kind of have to think about it and say, look, these kids have 4 years. It's to throw in the cliche, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. These kids have 4 years to kind of to kind of prove their worth, and I feel pretty confident in a lot of these players that are kind of making that impact. And this weekend, the next weekend, we'll see plenty of those kids. But no regrets on my end, because I feel that all these kids, or hopefully the overwhelming majority of the top 20 will make an impact. I mean, it was fun to watch Jack Rapine. It was fun to watch Joey Manown. I'm pumped to watch Ryan McNulty, and Justin Anderson has been going off. I love this group, and I can't say it enough about the class of 2016. You kind of looked at it a couple of years ago and knew that this would be a pretty impactful class, down the road. But it's like I said, it's tough to make an impact as a freshman. There's still plenty of kids that, I was worried about last year. The class of 2015, they weren't playing a whole lot, but then you talk to some different college coaches now, and they're all starting to really break through and find their confidence, because it's hard, to go from being a college to be a high school player, especially at Midi, and then going and throwing them out to the Wolves in Division I, just a few months later. It is hard.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest transformation for sure.
Definitely is.
Going from high school midfield to college midfield. You're just going against men, and if you aren't a man yet, you're struggling.
No, it's tough, and that's why you see such a huge jump from that freshman to sophomore season. My roommate's actually a volunteer assistant in the area and played high Division I lacrosse, and he was talking about how you come in from high school and kind of all the freshmen, they're all alpha males. They're used to being one of the top one or two or three players in their high school team, if not the whole area, and then like that first practice is just a wake up call, as a midfielder, because whether it's a long stick or a short stick, I mean, everybody's just a beast. Everybody's a beast, and it's tough to make that jump, but believe it or not, a lot of those kids do it.
Yep. So speaking of Jack Rapine, let's transition right into what happened last night. Hopkins beats Navy 15-8. You got to figure Hopkins' offense is back. Their defense holding Navy to 8 goals looks good. But before we get into the actual rundown of the game, the attendance in Baltimore was 1,400 people. Collectively, are you guys worried about that attendance? It was like, what was it? 7. It says here in the weather report in the box score, mostly sunny, 72 degrees, dash perfect with an exclamation mark. But only 1,400 people showed up. Are you disappointed by those attendance numbers?
I was. I got there. I was so fired up for that game, like the lacrosse nerd I am, and I got there an hour before, and just to kind of soak it all in and talk to some guys and enjoy the weather. And it's unfortunate there really weren't as many people there as there should have been, because it was fun. It was a great game, and as I said, great weather. I'm sure plenty of people were watching on TV. At 5 o'clock time slot, not to make excuses, that's a tough one. It's hard for a lot of people to get out of work, at this time of the year. So it was hard. I think there wasn't really the same attendance that you would see from the Hopkins students, I'm sure, because a lot of them just didn't realize that it's lacrosse season. It's February 7th last night, and I'm sure they're like, isn't this a spring sport? Isn't this March? But everybody in attendance, I think, was kind of pinching themselves because of the weather and how pleasant it was outside, that you can kind of almost watch in short sleeves in February. So, but it was a nice night in Baltimore. I believe that Hopkins is the only midweek game, but there's really no reason why there shouldn't be at least 2,500 to 3,000 people in the stands. And I'm not totally sure why.
Well, you know what? I will say that, like you referenced earlier, at 5 o'clock, I think if the game's at 7 o'clock, I think you get more people.
No doubt.
The other thing is you got an ESPNU, so even guys that get home at 5:30, 6 o'clock, they may say, you know what, I'd love to rush over there, but I'm only going to get there for the second half due to work or whatever, and it's on TV. I'll just watch it on TV.
Yeah.
I just think that may be something that if the game's at 7, because I believe last year the game was at 7 when it was played it was a later game, I think. I think it was a 7 o'clock game, and that, I believe, was very well attended. Did you go to that game last year, Ty?
It was cold. It was cold, but they had, I think it was 20,000 or 15,000 people viewing on Patriot League Network. Remember that game? That was the big stat of that game, was the number of views on the stream.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, it was freezing. I mean, that sums up the weather in the area. You really never know what you're going to get. Last year, tough winter, and this year hasn't been a whole lot. But I think, it'll kind of be interesting to see this year how much the trend that is. I think that attendance kind of goes down on multiple fronts, depending on the sport, because the TV coverage is just so strong. I mean, if I weren't just a 15-minute, 15 minutes from Hopkins, I'd probably sit in my hindquarters, with a beverage and watch that game and listen to Clark and Quint, because you get a lot out of it that way. But there's really nothing like, a 10-day game live,
So second question here is, what did you think about Quint's remark about tulips?
I'll throw that to AT.
I'm waiting for Quint to make a appearance on Vanderpump Rules. I think he would slide in perfectly with Tom Sandoval and Tom Schwartz. That was brilliant. I mean, he really does
planting tulips in his backyard. Here's another point. There was no play-by-play last night. There was no play-by-play last night. There was no play-by-play guy.
I like listening to Clark crush Anish Shroff regarding his opinionated movie, angle, and then Anish. It was good. It was really good.
I missed that. But here's the deal: Joel Tinney is back. Patrick Frazier with 3 goals. Wilkins Sneaky with 3 goals. Navy started strong. In fact, we're up 3-0 after the first quarter. Talk to me, Ty, about where you see, since you saw it live, and given the 15 goals that Hopkins put up. They put up 5 in the second, 6 in the third, and, of course, 4 in the fourth, none in the first. Looks like the beast was awakened. They played a ton of players on the offensive end. Talk to me a little bit about what your first-hand perspective was on Hopkins' offense.
I was just really impressed. Keep it simple. I think, like you said, they played 15 guys on offense in the first half, and that is such a good sign for how well they recruited, for how well they developed talent, their depth. And maybe they're kind of doing that to have some fresh legs, on game one. They've been bitten by the injury bug a little bit, so to kind of throw a bunch of guys out there and not rely too much on the big guns is a good sign. But I was really impressed. And I think, as everyone I'm sure is saying, there's no doubt that the turning point was that hidden ball trick. I mean, that was really that helped Hopkins just take off and dominate after that. But overall, I was really impressed with the offense. And, of course, it's easy to talk about how strong the O was. But believe it or not, the defense has been an issue for Hopkins the last couple of years as a surprise, because they've always had some great defensemen. Of course, you have, arguably the best defenseman of all time, at the helm, and Dave Petramala. But I was really impressed with Nick Fields. I thought that he was a monster. And he was putting pressure on guys all over and forcing turnovers. And you had, Ray Pine and fellow freshman Owen Colwell, who played on the man down. And Logan made the saves he needed to make. It was just top to bottom a really strong team effort against a really well-coached team in Navy. And honestly, one of the more athletic teams I've ever seen. I mean, they have so much athleticism, even kids I've never heard of that are just breaking through in the roster. And that's a tough team to match up with, and a tough defense that didn't fare so well. But I'll tell you what, I really feel like, just based off what I saw last night, what we saw last night, Hopkins had the makings of a Final Four team. And I thought they were kind of underranked, by NCAA Lacrosse. I want to say number 11 to start. They looked like a top 5 team last night, and they'll have some tests the next few weeks. Of course, Loyola comes up the street in 2 weeks to test them. But I was really impressed with what Hopkins brought to the table, how many bodies they ran. And it's just a different team when Joel Tinney's out there. I mean, he provides such a big spark, and we'll talk about that. But God, is that kid fun to watch.
He is, man. He's the difference for that team. I obviously he was out last season. He played as a freshman. I can't get over the energy that he brings and instant offense. I mean, I think he finished the game, I believe, 3-2, and it seemed like anytime he touched the ball, it seemed like they scored somehow. He makes all the simple plays, but he also makes a bunch of jaw-dropping plays look very, very easy, almost Casey Palish, really easy, and very matter of fact. And I just think he's a difference for a team that offensively has struggled, I think, at times. He seems to be the difference and able to get this team to 13 goals. Hard to think that they're going to play a team and they're going to hold them, under 10 goals, let alone under 12 or 13 goals with Joel Tinney healthy. He's just really, really, really impressive to watch.
And it wasn't like he was just, I mean, you look at the stat sheet and you watch the game, and we talked about how many bodies Hopkins ran. But as strong as Tinney was and a couple other guys out there, like, they weren't relying too much on any one guy. I mean, I don't think anybody in that team had more than 4 or 5 shots. I mean, they were spreading the rock a little bit. And what struck me is that I don't think Shaq Stanwyck had a shot until his goal in the third or fourth quarter. I think
right.
Shaq,
you're right.
Yeah, I mean, he
Shaq had 2 goals on 2 shots.
Yeah. And Tinney, I think, had 3 goals on 5 shots. So, they weren't relying too much on any one guy. Just Muke and Stanwyck, the veterans that offense kind of let the game come to them. And that was, just as pivotal of a factor as Tinney's, 5-point performance. And then you have, the elder statesman, John Crowley, who I think isn't too far away from beating Kimmel and Rabel's, record for games played at Hopkins. Crowley was excellent as well, playing a couple different roles, starting to attack and then, playing midi. As we said, there's so much depth at midfield that it'll be fun to watch, going forward, if they continue to do that. But man, this offense can run. They're very talented, and it'll be fun to watch going forward.
No doubt.
So now let's take a break real quick, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the games coming up this weekend. We've got a big one in Loyola UVA, but meanwhile, maximize your comfort.
At Sisu, we take a very scientific approach to making sure our technologically advanced, doctor-developed, scientifically backed, industry-changing mouthguards are the most protective, lightest, talkable, breathable, comfortable, drinkable, removable mouthguards on the planet to guarantee you're protected. No matter what comes your way, the Sisu Next Gen. Sisu, talk, breathe, drink.
Welcome back to the show. Big one. Navy Maryland coming up this weekend. Obviously, we just talked about Navy Hopkins, but talk to me, AT, I'm going to throw this to you. Talk to me a little bit about what you saw from Navy last night in terms of their outlook going into the 2017 season, getting a sneak preview of what they looked like against Hopkins.
I came back and I had a clinic I had to do last night, and I had 2 of them, and I got back and I had DVR the game. And so I started to watch it. And of course, I went public on Twitter going with JHU laying 2.5, and I took the over at 21.5. And about, 8 minutes into the game or whatever it was 3-zip Navy. And I was packed with regret. And they maybe just looked like they were in control. Brady Dove was controlling the face-offs. The wing play he was getting out of Matt Reese was phenomenal. He had some great GBs. They seemed like they had a plan on offense. They would initiate above the goal, throw it down the side, throw it back, and then reinitiate, with the attack. And it just seemed like they were in control of the game. They had 3 great saves right in a row by Ryan Kern, the first freshman to start. There in 20 years, I think Quinn had said since Mickey Jarbo. And I just felt like Navy was in control of the game. But then once Hopkins got the ball, and in particular once Joel Kinney got the ball, everything changed. And I'm not so positive that was a negative Navy as much as it was Hopkins just having too much for them. Essentially after a 3-0 lead, they get beat 15-5. Hopkins ends up winning the game 15-8. But you look at Navy's offense. They put 8 goals. They shoot 28%. They went 2 for 3 on man up, which is obviously very good. But I think they struggled to replace the scoring of Casey Reese, and that's something that we all were speculating on coming into the season. A couple of big bombs by, Jack Ray, Ryan Wade played well as their playmaker, but they're going to have to find more offense. I mean, eight goals is just not going to get it done. And I worry about them playing a team like Maryland, whose defense is going to be better than Hopkins' defense. And their face-off group with their wings is better than Hopkins. So I think Brady Dubbs is going to struggle in this game against Maryland. I think he won 11 out of 20 in this game, and they won a little over 50% for the game. I think that Navy's going to get beat in this area. I think they're going to get beat 60% in this area. And I don't think this is a good matchup for Navy at all. I don't think they have enough offense. I think they're going to lose the faceoffs, and defensively, while they play with, more balls than anybody on the defensive end, I just think they're going to get worn down from having to play defense 3/4 of this game, and I just don't think it sets up well for Navy, even though they're playing at home. Ryan Kern, again, he goes from Hopkins to Maryland. I mean, right into it. The kid played really, really well, but look at some of those shots that Hopkins hit. They hit some serious bombs to beat him, and I think they're going to unfortunately be in for an 0-2 start after this game on Saturday.
Ryan Kern was in your top 50, Ty. How are you feeling about Navy, and then maybe how they match up against Maryland?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel that the Navy will definitely be a contender in the Patriot League, but I think it'll take them some time. I think they're, as we discussed, I think they're kind of figuring out their offensive identity, and, also figuring out how to, what to do around Ryan Kern. I mean, like we said, I think he was facing some shots that, no one had a chance saving. I mean, those were some absolute rockets. You almost felt bad for him in a sense because he's getting thrown out to the wolves. But otherwise, I thought he was strong. I didn't once regret putting him at my number 3 spot at the goalie position. But overall, I think you could tell it's just like Hopkins is a different offense with Joel Kinney. I think Navy is a very different offense without Casey Reese. And
Agreed.
you see that more in hindsight, kind of looking back. You see just how crucial he was to their success last year as a young guy. And then you watch last night, just watching that live. It really felt like there were a lot of those guys that were getting caught up in traffic and turning the ball in traffic, getting caught by a trail check or whatever it is. They just looked overwhelmed. And the Hopkins defense did a phenomenal job kind of swarming to the big man, Jack Ray, who didn't have his best game, but I think, still put up 2 and 1 on 7 shots. But they kind of just got to figure out, a multitude of roles, there. I mean, Grayson Terrain was outstanding as a freshman, but was very underwhelming, last night. And the Pac-12 player that I'm sure, could have a great year, but definitely some growing pains and I wouldn't say identity crisis, but they've got to figure themselves out and kind of in a hurry because they're playing a very, very, strong Maryland team. And I think Navy always has a great home field advantage. So it'll be interesting to see how many people show up in Annapolis and what kind of support they get and how they play at home. after a wake-up call last night at Hopkins. But, you know, I'm just intrigued to kind of see the roles of Ryan Wade and Terrain and some younger guys. But if they had the personnel, you know, I think between the lines and you know, on their back line on defense.
To me, and RJ, I know you'll go real quick, but sorry to interrupt. But, you know, to me, the answer for Maryland here is you got to get Grayson Terrain 10 dodges a game.
Yeah.
You just have to, because, and Quint and Clark did a great job. You know, they were alluding to the fact that, you know, when Grayson Terrain was dodging, he had a great invert goal that he stuck around the right side high on the goalie. You know, but to telegraph his dodges the way that they do, it just undermines his ability to beat people quickly and allows defenses to defend him with 6 guys. You know, and if they are able to get his dodges more off quick ball movement and less dragging them to a spot and going, you know, all he's got to do is beat his guy, which he's going to do every time, regardless of who's covering him. Okay? And a lot of times he's quick and slick enough to beat the slide as well and to get really deep inside the other team's defense and score goals. I think you got to dodge him all the time, particularly when, you know, the other guys are not getting 8 goals is just not going to get it done. And, you know, I just feel like, agree with you, Casey Reese, you know, he was winning his matchup for goals no matter which pole was covering him last year. And I think that with him gone, they're going to have trouble creating consistent slides from their opponent's defense unless they're dodging Grayson Terrain. You just don't power dodge in Division I lacrosse and have a ton of success the way that you will if you do quick, slick dodges, because the defenses are too quick to slide. It's too hard to get away from the double teams, and it just doesn't translate as well. You know, if you're going to redodge with the power guy and he's only has to beat one guy to score, great. But to make the power dodge the first dodge, I think you're going to struggle offensively over the course of the season that way.
I was fortunate enough to be able to watch Maryland play Penn this past weekend. Maryland does the old scrimmage jersey switch, which is good. It's fascinating.
Which one's Matt Rambo?
Well, you could tell who Matt Rambo was, and you could certainly tell who Heacock was. But you know what it's good as? It's like you couldn't really tell who was who in terms of the newcomers, and it's really smart that he does it. But I can tell you this, Maryland has depth. They have depth in between the lines, not that they've never had that before. I mean, we're talking about the Maryland Terps here. You know, they've always had depth, but I'm talking like a depth similar to what you saw at Hopkins. And I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of midfielders running through the box come Saturday against Navy. But I also think that, you know, their attack is strong. Look, Matt Rambo is Matt Rambo. And he plays like it every single time. Every time he touches the ball on the offensive end, regardless if he's wearing the number 1 jersey or in the case of the scrimmage, he was wearing the number 8 jersey or 7. I don't even remember. It doesn't care. Every time he gets the ball, it's like, oh, crap, oh, crap, oh, crap. Or if you're a fan, it's, oh, my God, he's going to score. Oh, my God, he's going to score. Every single time. It's interesting, too, that, you know, Maryland over the last few years have been very, very conservative on their offensive possessions. It seems as though they might let Matt Rambo do his thing, much like we saw back in 2010, 11, and 12, or wherever that was, where Rob Pennell would control the first 15 to 20 seconds of every single possession. And if that's the case going into the 2017 season, it's going to be real exciting to watch Matt Rambo. He might end up with 150 points. In terms of the defense, I mean, he has the ability to do it. It's phenomenal. But in terms of the defense, again, you know, looking from, you know, just a fan's perspective of that scrimmage, you're looking at a situation where Maryland looks strong on the defensive end. They've got athletes, but I think they might have some questions in goal. I think that, Morris is a formidable goalie, but certainly not Bernlaw, right? Not many teams have that, and that's going to be a huge loss for Maryland going into this season. But I think it's a nice matchup for Maryland in the beginning of the season against Navy. But here's the deal. If Navy starts out as fast as they did against Hopkins, and they can play as tough as they did in the beginning of the game and continue that, they have a chance. Navy is not exactly – I think that Navy ran into a juggernaut this weekend. I think, much like what Ty just said, they're a Final Four potential team if they continue the streak. And so I don't think you can look at Navy as a team that's like, well, I think they might be struggling. I don't really necessarily know that. Yes, no doubt Casey Reese is a huge, huge loss. But I think that going into this weekend, I think Navy's got a decent shot at putting up a good game against a very strong Maryland opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a team that will probably, they'll sit down the next couple of days, look at the film, and kind of look at their weaknesses a little bit, and will probably play much better lacrosse than they did last night. I think there's no doubt about that. I mean, it's too strong of a roster and a coaching staff just to roll over, against Maryland. Especially at home. They'll be playing some inspired ball. They've got to figure some things out, but I agree. I think this is a team that has a lot of talent, and will be a contender for the Final Four, and this won't change that. But like you said, I mean, Maryland is pretty loaded, and all things I've heard just without watching Maryland is that so far in scrimmages is that Rambo is just a beast. It's not just the shooting. I was talking to a coach who was saying he was just blown away at how much more dynamic he is in comparison to last year, just with getting attention and then, throwing a skip pass. I mean, his vision is apparently off the charts. So I'm really intrigued to kind of see that and how that works within this offense, because we know they lost a whole lot the last couple of years at the midfield position. And this is a very senior-laden attack unit. To kind of see how his role morphs a little bit and how he takes on, more. And I think I would agree that he probably will have the ball in his stick a bit more than he did in the past, just what they lost and how much better he is than last year, from what I've heard.
So Hopkins plays UMBC this coming weekend. Probably not much to talk too much about that game in itself. UMBC coming off a loss, 17-6 loss against UNC. Max Maxwell is getting the job done, but I think that there are a lot of parts to UMBC that needs to improve over the season. And we all know that Ryan Moran will get those pieces together to finish strong in 2017. But in terms of their first two games going against the Carolina Blue and then the Columbia Blue, it's going to be awfully tough. I see Hopkins continuing to do what they did or feeding off of what they did on Tuesday night. I think that we might even see even more contributors to the game this weekend. But I'm sure you guys agree that the Hopkins UMBC tilt this weekend will probably end up being a little bit one-sided.
Yeah, listen, you got to look at this game and I think UMBC is going to struggle versus the five-headed monster of JHU's offense: Stanwick, Tinney, Dismuke, Crawley, and Frazier. I mean, what a beast of a shooter he is. I think one thing that we didn't talk about when we were covering the Navy JHU game, which I'm just going to touch on, and then I'll get Ty's view on it, is the Gerald Logan, right? 8 goals allowed,
That's right.
8 saves. But the most important stat was 18 for 20 on the clears for JHU. Yep. And last year versus Navy and versus so many opponents, they just didn't get it done in the clearing game and gave their opponents too many second chance opportunities. And as a result, didn't have a great year by Hopkins standards, and I think that if Jerry Logan can continue to get the stops that he should in the goal, which I think we're going to get out of him. But most importantly, continue to commander the clearing game. If they clear it 90% all year long, I don't think there's any doubt that this is a team that's going to be right there playing on Memorial Day weekend. And it's scary to think if you give their offense and those five guys the ball 90% of the time after you get a stop at the defensive end. So that's my only piece on it.
Yeah, no,
Ty,
I think it's important to point out how strong that clearing game was. I think their two missed clears were in the first half, and they came together. I would imagine there was a pretty strong emphasis on defensive stick work and just the overall organization of the clears. And you don't want to take too much out of just one game, but I think the clearing and just the veteran presence of Logan and guys like Nick Fields was just huge, for Hopkins. But moving on to Saturday, I think that's a tough matchup for UMBC. But I think what I've heard is they've had a phenomenal couple of days of practice. The guys are pretty pissed off after getting beaten down in Chapel Hill by the Tar Heels, which I think many teams probably would to start the year. But having a couple of days of practice and also having the film of Hopkins to kind of help them prepare is pretty huge. And Ryan Moran, it's interesting. It makes sense when you look at it backwards. But Ryan Moran has played Hopkins every year since 1999.
Wow.
So few people know Hopkins more than Rymo, and that staff must be working pretty hard to get ready for that offense at Hopkins. But I don't see them having much of a chance on Saturday. But I do think this is a team that will maybe take their lumps in the early part, but they'll have some matchups with Richmond and Marist and Mercer the next few weeks. It'll prepare them well for the America East schedule. But I don't see it happening on Saturday, and it's just that's a daunting task to play a team like that where there's just a massive disparity on the roster. It's not like many kids or any kid that are at Hopkins were also looking at UMBC. It's just not happening, So it's just a different playing field in a sense.
So the last segment of the show, we're going to talk about probably what I would consider, and I'm sure you guys would consider, the game of the week. We unveil the new Virginia Cavaliers against the season's Final Four Loyola Greyhounds this weekend. They've been matching up at the beginning of the season for the last few years now, and they've all been great games. I believe that it is a tied series between the two going into this. I might be wrong, or Loyola might have an edge there. However, it's been a great first game of the season for many of us. AT, talk to us a little bit about the upcoming UVA Loyola Tilt.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this is absolutely the game of the week. I'll go through Virginia statistically because that's what I do, but I'm not positive that these statistics are any indication on what we're going to see out of Virginia this year. In 2016, they come off a very disappointing season by Virginia standards, but not by Dartmouth standards. They were 7-8 overall, 0-4 in the ACC, right? Their offense was throwing up a little over 10.5 goals a game on 27% shooting. They return attackman Ryan Lukovic, 20 goals, 16 assists. Zed Williams, who I think was playing midfield for them the majority of the year last year, 22 goals, 5 assists. A.J. Fish, 14 goals, 8 assists. Mike DeMario, 16 goals, 4 assists. And top recruit in the country, Ryan Conrad, finishing his freshman year with 9 goals and 3 assists. I think their offense is going to explode this year. Under new coach Lars Tiffany and his staff, I think this team goes from scoring 10.5 a game to at least 12 a game. And that may be a conservative estimate. On the defensive end, they've got a lot of the pieces in place here to have a very, very strong defense. Just a year ago, they let up a little over 10 goals a game, 10.33 a game, and they return lockdown stud Tanner Scales, 14 starts last year. Scott Hooper, son of my boy Paul Hooper, who coached us at Brown, just simply put, one of the best lacrosse minds in sport. Scott Hooper had 15 starts for them last year. Zach Ambrosino had 9 starts. And they return arguably the best long stick committee in the country in Mike Howard. Logan Greco also had 7 starts. So they return a veteran group on the back line. Lars is definitely going to have those guys dialed in and playing as a unified group, which is scary. I think an unanswered question is, who are they going to be in the goal? Obviously, they suspended Matt Barrett, or he's no longer with the program. I don't know the exact status, so I'll just leave it at that. It appears as though Will Rayleigh is going to end up starting in goal for them. He was a backup in 2016. From what I've heard through the grapevine is that he had a great fall and that he, looks to be a possible strength of the team. Beyond that, face-off ex Jason Murphy did very, very well for these guys, 62%, 1 goal, 1 assist, probably off the break. If they can get 60% or greater at the face-off X, that will help take some pressure off of their new goaltender. I think they're going to be able to hold some people down better than they have in the past few years or the last few years under Dom. And I don't doubt in my mind that their pace of play is going to have a massive positive effect on the overall outcome offensively for them. So I see Virginia at a much, much, much improved. And even though they're driving up to play Loyola at Loyola, I think this is going to be a close game. I don't know what Las Vegas Lines has for this line. It wouldn't surprise me to see Virginia go up there and shock Loyola and beat them. But I think Loyola is going to win the game. I do. I just think that them coming off the momentum from last year, they have arguably the best player in the country in Pat Spencer, an unbelievable supporting cast as well. But I think Virginia is going to be a brand new team. This is a game I think Loyola wins this weekend, but I'm not positive that this is a game Loyola wins in May if they end up seeing each other again. So it's going to be interesting to watch this game. I agree. I think this is the game of the week.
Ty, how much do you know about Loyola going into the 2017 season, other than the fact that you, like many other people, probably did not have Patrick Spencer in their top list of recruiting at that point?
Well, I'm naturally a very defensive person. I'll defend myself there. I think Spencer was a top 20 recruit on my list, and I forget exactly where he was, but I just didn't expect that impact. I did not expect the impact that he had, and I ranked him number 14 heading into his freshman year. But I'm kind of curious, and I'm sure he will, but can he keep it up now that everyone has a full year of film on him? I mean, he's very hard to stop. He's so dynamic and big and athletic, and lets the game come to him. But how will teams game plan against him? And can, I think just as important, can the pieces around him perform up to par? I mean, what I've heard is that one of the starters on Loyola's offense will be out a couple of games for an off the field issue. So can they pick up the pieces and kind of get some depth and run with UVA, because we know that the Wahoos will be pushing the rock and playing fast, which is what they did at Brown and will continue to do so at UVA. But I'm on board with AT in that, I'm going back and forth. I do think Loyola wins this by a goal or two now, but if this was to go down, say in the Final Four in a few months, I think it's different. I think UVA will be coming along really well, and just with what they're doing to that program with a shot in the arm and that coaching staff coming over, it could take a little time, but I think this is going to be a team that contends for Final Four spot right away. And they're raving about how strong Zed Williams has been on the attack end and how great it's been to have Lukovic run out of the box. And it sounds like they're keeping kids like Will McNamara and Ryan Conrad and Dox Aiken on the field a ton 2 ways. So I'm really intrigued to see, how that works on Saturday. I know I'll be at Ridley, which I think is probably the best student section in the country, and just a great venue for lacrosse. And I'm sure a lot of lacrosse fans will be out there regardless of the weather. But it should be a really competitive game, and I'm just kind of intrigued to see how UVA does in the face-off next and in goal. Will Riley's a kid who I really enjoyed watching in high school at Georgetown Prep. I didn't love him at first when he committed, and then you saw him as a senior and just saw how much better he got. And just talking to Kip Turner down there, who's a goalie whisperer of sorts, it really sounds like he's getting better and better as the weeks go on. So I'm interested to see how he does against, Pat Spencer, Romar Dennis, and Brian Sherlock on Saturday. But it should be a hell of a game.
I am fascinated, and I'm hoping for Pat Spencer. I don't think there are many times that someone comes out as a freshman and consistently performs for 4 years like that. Rob Pennell had a great freshman season, but wasn't the same as Patrick Spencer's. The only player that I think you can go back to having 4 seasons consistently like Pat Spencer had his freshman year would be Mikey Powell. Yes. I'm rooting for that. I'm rooting for him to be the next, say, Mikey Powell. Obviously, much different games, and Mikey Powell will forever be in the definitely the top 10 collegiate players of all time. However, I worry about a sophomore season, right? I mean, they call it the sophomore slump for a reason, but I think that with all the returning pieces, having Sherlock a piece of that, losing Haywires is not going to be helpful to him in any manner, but certainly most of the pieces are back together. Now, the biggest piece in my mind is Romar Dennis. Can he put his shots on cage? Finally, he's a senior. He literally is uncoverable, but the problem is over the course of his career, he has not put the ball on cage. And I think that is the difference maker. As soon as Romar Dennis is able to put his shots on cage and be the impact we all know he can be, now all of a sudden Patrick Spencer, all the pressure is relieved after Patrick Spencer, and he ends up having a great sophomore season. I actually do think, though, going into this weekend, the exact opposite of you guys. I think that Virginia is going to kill it this weekend. I have them winning by 2 or 3 goals. But I think that the way that Lars wants to run and, Sean Kerwin wants to run, I think that it's going to wear out a team at the end of the season a little too early because you're just not prepared to play that way on a consistent basis for 18 straight games. And I think that that's okay. It's year one for Lars, but I think a team like Loyola, whose seasons actually sees, and paces themselves at a manner that gets them to the Final Four or late farther into the tournament than, say, a Virginia team does. And so that's where I see it. I think it's going to be a great year for Virginia. It's going to be very positive and a lot of buzz on campus, and everyone's going to be happy. But I think this is, as a first-year program running the system that Lars wants to do, will run its course a little earlier than it should in 2017, only to set up for a great 2018 and beyond. But in terms of Loyola, I think they start out a little slower than people imagine. I think Virginia jumps out on top. And I think that Loyola, in the end, though, with the schedule that they have, they'll run through the Patriot League, and they'll be poised to make an impact late in the season with a very veteran crew in the national tournament. So that's my thoughts. Yeah. That is all for the show. We went a little longer for today's show, but we had a great guest on. Ty, thank you so much, man, for coming on. It was
Thanks,
awesome.
Ty. You're the man.
Fellas, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it.
Bye, brother.
So if you haven't already, check out recruitingrundown.com. You can check out all of Ty's rankings from the 2016 freshman in college all the way to 2019 in high school. Check it out. He does a lot of work. He does a lot of hard work. He'll also be traveling around the country Contact him for any commits, news, or any of the sort. In the meantime, In Your Face will be back tomorrow with another show. And until then, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at In Your Face Lax. We will check you out tomorrow. Thanks a lot for the listen. I appreciate it.